Hi there, and welcome to Creatively Me with Bree. You guessed it, I am Bree, and today we are making a chalkboard background wallpaper for an iPad. If you want to make a background wallpaper for, say, an iPhone or perhaps an Android or some other kind of device, just make sure that you look up the actual pixels that are required for the dimensions, and then that's what you can use as your base dimension points. Now, the image that I have in the background, I got off a website of which allows you to use royalty-free images so long as you alter them. Make sure that if you do that, that you read carefully through the licensing agreement and content usage. An alternative option is going outside, finding some good textured concrete that has nice variation in color, and take a photograph yourself. Now, once I have the chalkboard background to my liking, I wanted it to look distressed and well used and maybe even antique, if you will. And then I grabbed the 4B compressed charcoal brush that comes with the Procreate app, and I started doodling. I want to show you two different approaches. So the one approach that I'm showing right now is literally going in and hand drawing each and every element. Now, this approach can work, and I'm not trying to discourage anyone from using their creativity and really just going with the flow. If you have the time and the desire to really get invested and just take it one element at a time, I'm so for that. However, in a moment, I am going to show you how to expedite this process in case you're someone like me who can sometimes get a little impatient and want to jump ahead to the final product. So while we have a few moments before we switch over to the other approach that I wanted to show you, I want to stress again to my audience, and I say it with almost every tutorial that I come out with, make sure that you have a sketch ready. I didn't make a sketch. I made these designs on the fly, which good for me, but it doesn't always work out well for me. It did this time, and I am tremendously thankful for that, but don't be like me and make sure that you do that sketch. I figure if I mention sketching enough times, I will even convince myself to participate in it regularly. So with that being said, you can see that I am drawing out individual elements. After each element is done, I hide the layer and I create a new layer to create another element. I'm calling them elements. They're floral elements. You can call them layers, whatever sort of words, vernacular feels good to you. And again, because it is a chalk piece, you could do some shading if you wanted to. That might be something that I add into another tutorial, but for this one, I just went with line work just to keep it simple and easily readable. And again, just a very quick project. So again, as you can see, I have made several different layers with different elements, trying to make them uniquely different from one another so that they actually stand out as separate floral pieces in the overall project as it comes together. And this may be obvious, maybe not, but because this is a line work project, because there is no variation of color, right? There's no shading. The line work on these really do need to be on point. So make sure that you really do take your time to get your shapes exactly as you want them, and to make sure that you have really nice lines. And that's dependent, of course, on your style. Everyone's style will vary, obviously, and so your line work will be dependent on your type of style. I am almost done with the elements for this project. I believe I think I used 6 or 7. It might have been 7. Maybe 8, who knows? But I did make quite a variation, and that's just because when it comes to a project that has repetitive patterns, in order to not notice just how repetitive the patterns and shapes are, it is helpful to have a good amount of variation. And so, yeah, I believe this is the last element that I made. And the good news is we are about halfway done with this video, so if you've made it this far, thank you. You're a rock star. And also, now what you're going to see, I have sped this up so that I don't bore you to death. I essentially am playing art Tetris. I am moving around my elements. I'm taking one element at a time, and I'm going to move them around until I like their placement and feel like they're relatively spaced apart evenly. And also feel different so that they're not all facing the same way and in the same direction. Once I have that done, I combine them all onto one layer, and then I move on to the next element, which in this case was a flower. And I move that flower around, and I also change the size of that flower. I was going to say shape. I don't change the shape. I do, however, change the size. And then this is a rather large element, so I actually only have 2 on there, and then little bits sticking off of the edge, which I also want to take note of. When you are creating the illusion of a seamless pattern, because this is not a seamless pattern, this is just a bunch of elements thrown onto a canvas, you do want them to bleed off of the canvas. If you don't have it bleed off, it will look awkward, and it will look... it just won't have like a sense of it was intended to be a pattern. So as you can tell, then I had those 2 larger floral elements, and I just had one of each because I didn't want them to have to compete and start taking up too much space to be noticed. And then I took the little 3-leaf piece at the bottom there. Then I had this larger leaf, and again, I didn't want it to have to compete for space. So I was very selective in how much it showed up and where. So yeah, it only has one full representation on that page. And then I start going in with the 3 smaller leaves, which I know is a little hard to see, but I'm about to zoom in. So then again, I just turn them around and play art Tetris, filling up any major large spaces remaining. So again, just finding the flow, making sure it all looks natural and like it was hand drawn that way. And I zoom out and you can see that there's still some space, but none of it is awkward, but I did want to continue to add just these tiny little elements in there. This is, I would say, probably a signature style of mine. I really love dots and little leaves and just little elements just popping in and out of the piece. So I do that throughout the rest of it. And by the end, it's all filled up nice. So I'll just quietly talk here while we watch as I add in the little leaves and little dots. You could do other things like swirls. You could also do small little flowers. There's other little elements that you could have added in, but I really like just simple little leaves and dots. And that was a personal choice. Again, I think the piece was fine without these added elements. If you want something that's more simplistic, you don't have to take that last step. And here's the final product. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to subscribe.